Way to start Fantasy Week 16. Not Kamara, not really Cup, but honestly, pretty good overall. And not the Saints DST either. But it's Adam, Dave, and Jamie here on Friday. Happy Friday, everybody. Mailbag coming up later today. You know that. But right now, we'll talk about 7 NFC home games, including the game of the week. Yeah, the Baltimore-San Francisco game, Detroit, Minnesota, Indianapolis at Atlanta, Jacksonville at Tampa Bay, the Giants at the Eagles, the Cardinals at the Bears, the Packers at the Panthers. Jamie, I know you had that one league where it was like all Thursday. Which players did you have in that?
I had Kamara and Kyron, so 1 or 2 good, and Puka and Olave. Very happy.
Yes.
Oh, all 4 of them. Okay.
Yeah. And
3 out of 4 ain't bad.
I was playing against Haversick, and I don't pay attention to kicker rules. Apparently, we get negative points for missed kicks, so I was happy on the first missed field goal.
Oh, okay. He ended up having a pretty good game.
He did.
Should we start incorporating that more in leagues that have kickers, or should we just continue to say don't have kickers in fantasy? That's probably what we should do.
I don't mind incorporating that. It's fine.
I think if you're going to use kickers, include the negative scoring.
Yeah. And then as one of our colleagues says, when they miss kicks, just choke them.
Choke them. Jeez. I choke them.
Haversick, I feel like he does miss a lot of field goals.
Well, I think he did, and then they brought in Mason Crosby and put him on the practice squad, and then he started making his kicks, and then they cut Mason Crosby, and now he's missing kicks again. So,
yeah, that's one of the reasons. Crosby. He's 3 for 4, 2 for 3. Yeah, he misses. He's a misser, but he gets a lot of points. They're scoring a lot. All right, so we'll talk about that game. Let's go to that one right now. How about that? Derek Carr actually had a better game than Matthew Stafford, not IRL, but in fantasy. Carr scored about 30 points, Stafford 25 points. And are you going to start either of them next week? Stafford at the Giants, and Carr is, who's got Otis Carr at Tampa Bay.
At Tampa Bay. So, yeah, they're both in play to start, but Stafford's just rolling hot right now. Offensive line's giving good protection. I liked how he was moving around, like being able to hang in the pocket, move out of the pocket. That's something that's a little bit different, not a statue like he's been before. And the accuracy is amazing. The touchdown to Demarcus Robinson was awesome. He's been playing great. I don't see how he's not a top 10 quarterback next week.
At the Giants. And then, how about Demarcus Robinson? I think if you missed the game, Cooper Kupp dropped 2 difficult but catchable touchdowns.
True.
One of them was followed by a Puka Nacua touchdown catch. One of them was followed by a field goal. So Kupp had a couple of chances, and he had 12 targets, I think. He just didn't have a good game. But I think the 2 big storylines would be Kamara with a total dud and Demarcus Robinson with a great game.
Yeah.
And maybe Shaheed too. So, Jamie, does anything change for you going forward with some of these players?
Well, Shaheed, last week's game was disappointing. Week 15's game was disappointing because no Olave, and he had been shake the rust off game because of the, absence with the thigh injury because nobody has thigh injuries. But I think if you saw the 2 games before he got hurt, and it coincided with Michael Thomas getting hurt. So the first game that Thomas was either hurt or out, he had 9 targets in that game and really was a focal point of the offense. Then against Atlanta, which is the game he got hurt, he had 5 targets. I think it was in the first quarter of the first half before he went out. So they were really trying to get him involved. And you mentioned this when we previewed the show that the less Taysom Hill has played, the more Derek Carr has obviously have opportunities to throws, which is clearly benefiting the receiving core there. And I wonder how much that may or may not change coming off of a loss, because Taysom Hill's been a non-factor for 2 straight weeks, 1 win, 1 loss. So as long as Thomas is out, I think, especially next week, Shaheed's in play as a number 3 receiver in 3 receiver leagues. And for Demarcus Robinson, it's just one of those, I think, dart throw type of guys. If you need a wide receiver, we'll see what injuries come out of this week. Jamar Chase, let's say, for example, doesn't play next week. Not a bad guy to pivot to because the Giants won't be able to cover all the Rams, and clearly Robinson right now is a factor. I know there was the Tutu Atwell return, and maybe that was going to be something people were worried about, but Robinson, 4 touchdowns in 4 straight games with a touchdown, that's hard to overlook with the way Stafford's playing.
10 snaps for Taysom Hill, by the way. That number went down from last week, I believe. So
there
could be a phasing out here. It could be finally happening just in time for week 17.
And they didn't even use him on the 2-point conversion. I thought they would, and they did not. And I'll say this for Shaheed. If you look at his route depth, I think that maybe in the past few games without Michael Thomas, they were trying to change him into something that he isn't. They were making him a short area guy. This game, he was back to 10-plus yards of route depth, just being a deep threat, which makes him inconsistent and unreliable. But I think it might be the role that he's just better at. So he went back to that.
No, they still used him on. He still ran a bunch of short routes too.
Well, of course, he's always going to run.
Is that it doesn't? I don't know if that necessarily gives you a clear picture of usage.
Well, and I mean, nobody's going to run a deep route every play, but obviously he had a 15-yard ADOT in this game.
That's what I care about, because now they're using him in a certain way and they're putting the ball toward him. They're throwing him.
And Kamara next week at Tampa Bay. I don't know. If Tampa Bay does well against ETN, you might have a little bit of hesitation with Kamara next week, because Vita Vea is back, and I don't know.
It's hard to bench guys like this though, because there's just still so much upside.
And I did mention this: the Rams are absolutely unbelievable against pass catching running backs. He had 5 catches for 16 yards. The Rams are the best in the business. They give up the fewest receiving yards per game to running backs.
I started to dig into that this morning, and that'll be something that I'll work on this offseason. One of the reasons why is because they play heavy zone coverage. And so what that means is that all the defensive players are facing the quarterback. But the other thing that they did a really good job at, and I really can't wait to go back and see this during the offseason, they can sniff out the screens and the dump off passes, the flare passes to running backs. At least they did against Kamara. They did it really, really well. And the Saints didn't scheme all of them up very, very well either. So that's kind of a two-sided thing where the Saints didn't do a good enough job getting Kamara, the play drawn up properly, or was a dump-off pass where Derek Carr checked down. And the Rams seem to be really smart about attacking and rallying to whoever's about to get the ball instead of reacting once the player has the ball.
It's going to be interesting to see, though, what their new defensive coordinator does, because Raheem Morris is getting a head coaching job.
He could get one. Absolutely. He should be in contention for one again.
Yeah, I mean, they always seem to have good defensive coordinators there.
Where does Sean McVay fall on Coach of the Year rankings?
I mean, it's him, it's Stefanski, it's Steichen.
Shanahan?
It's hard to give it to Shanahan because they were expected to be good.
I know, but they're really good.
Okay, so anyway, Chris, I think Chris is going to write an article. Check it out. We were talking about it last night. Is Puka Nacua the best waiver wire pickup in history? We were trying to figure out better ones than Puka Nacua. I suggested maybe Darren Waller when he was tight end 2 in 2019.
I don't know if he was a pickup then.
Was that?
I don't know if Darren Waller was a pickup back then.
Well, not for you, but I think he probably was.
There are a lot of people that like Waller after Hard Knocks because he was so popular. I think in terms of even this year, Kyren Williams.
I mean, you could, if Kyren Williams didn't miss that 4 games, I believe, then maybe you give it to him, and maybe you still give it to him. So, but they have 2 of the best waiver wire pickups ever. Basically, it's crazy. All right,
coaching.
Yeah, let's see what Chris comes up with as he kind of digs into.
We got to learn from that this offseason. That's another thing we have to do. What can we learn from that we can apply to next year? So we can, it's always my goal is to find those guys before week 1.
Well, I mean, I think Kyren Williams is a complete shock, but all right, but that's a topic for a different day. YouTube.com/fantasy football today. That's where you can watch all of our content. That's where you can watch our live stream at 11:30 a.m. Eastern on Sunday mornings. YouTube.com/fantasy football today, 11:30 a.m. Eastern on Sunday mornings. Before that, at 10 a.m. Eastern on Sunday mornings, tune into CBS Sports HQ on the CBS Sports app, and you can watch Dave, Jamie, and Heath on Fantasy Football Today there. And we will have a Christmas Eve recap show at 9:30 p.m. We usually start around 8, so it's going to be later. It's not going to change anything for those of you that listen on Mondays, but if you want to watch it live, it's going to be later on Christmas Eve. I want to thank Dave and Jamie for accommodating there, and because I have plans and family stuff. So anyway, we'll see you Christmas Eve. Yeah. I just want to tell you real quick, 2 players. I got a heebie-jeebies segment here. 2 players that are giving me the heebie-jeebies this week. Saquon Barkley at the Eagles and Travis Etienne at the Bucs. I'm getting some heebie-jeebies from them.
I mean, I think, you could factor in Kamara, you could throw in Derrick Henry, you could throw in Austin Eckler, these guys that are hard to say are sit candidates, but they have difficult situations or struggling or both. And it's like we've talked about this a couple times during the week. Like, who are you starting over them? It's just difficult to say. Like, in the case of any of these running backs, let's say you have a good roster because you're in the semis. Are you going to play Dontavian Wicks over Saquon Barkley in a flex? Like, there's
No,
not many people that would ever do that.
no.
I know, like, in one.
James Cook is easy. I mean, a lot of guys have.
Yeah, I mean,
really
look, if you have great players, I I had back-to-back tweets, because I did a little Ask FFT yesterday before the games, for the game, and somebody sent me a who do I sit out of Diggs, Puka, and another great receiver, and I said Puka, and the guy wrote back, oh, I get it, Puka had a great game, and
He wrote back things you can't say on the show.
no, I don't care. I mean, you have a great roster. You have a great roster. There's nothing you can do. Somebody's going to have a good game on your bench. And then, but right below it, I had said Puka over Zeke. It was like, back-to-back tweets. Thanks, Jamie. Sorry, Jamie. That's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
And you're going to have these tough calls, so you just have to have the cojones to bench one of these guys when you have, some questionable calls. If you have great players, it's easier. James Cook is easy. Raheem Mostert's easy.
Yep.
No, but it's a shame because I think Barkley, Zeke, ETN is so hard for me. I tried to rank them yesterday for somebody, I think, and I was like, they're basically the same. I don't even know. I think I'd go with, gosh, I think I'd go with Zeke in that, but I'll get into why I'm nervous about Travis Etienne and Saquon Barkley coming up, and I'll see if Dave and Jamie feel the same way. I mean, the rankings would suggest that they are starters, but well, Jamie's got Barkley 20th, so that's interesting as well. Okay, news and notes. Trevor Lawrence unlikely to play. CJ Stroud out. Kenny Pickett out. Is CJ Stroud officially out?
No.
Okay, but almost certainly out. Kenny Pickett is out. Mason Rudolph would start. You guys think this is like the right time of year for me? Okay, never mind.
Let's spend 5 minutes on Mason Rudolph.
Geno Smith is playing. Okay, running backs. Jonathan Taylor, full participant. He said he wanted to test the thumb. Do you guys have any hesitation with Jonathan Taylor at this point?
No, the fact that he wasn't, according to the reports, he was just wearing gloves. There was nothing bulky on his thumb. So, yes, does he want to test it out, make sure he's fine? Obviously. Does it sound like he's playing? Yes. And I think it could be really good for him if Zach Moss does not play.
Potentially the first running back to have a monster game against Atlanta this year.
He's scoring. He's going to be the first to score a rushing touchdown. Josh Jacobs missed practice. They are playing on Monday, so still time there for Jacobs. Tony Pollard said he acknowledged that he's beat up, he's acknowledged that he took a long time to recover from the surgery in the offseason, but he says he's feeling healthier now. Jerick McKinnon missed practice. That's not necessarily unusual. AJ Dillon practiced. We'll talk about that game. Ken Walker, Jamie, he's your start of the week. He hasn't practiced yet. He's got the shoulder injury. What are you doing there with Ken Walker?
Well, obviously today's a big day. If he doesn't practice, then I'll have to pick a new start of the week. And Zach Charbonnet would be an absolute monster if there's no Ken Walker.
Could be really easy. You just make Zach Charbonnet the start of the week.
True.
Brian Robinson, we're expecting him at this point at the Jets?
No.
Okay. And Alexander Madison is not going to play. Is that official, or am I?
I think it's
not official.
I don't think it's official, but I think it's looking that way. And O'Connell's been talking up Ty Chandler for like 5 days now.
Tyreek Hill practiced. That's good. Keenan Allen is not going to play. Devontae Smith has this knee issue, and that's a Monday game. So he missed practice. He's got a knee thing. We'll see if he practices today. Let's see what else we got. Nico Collins looks like he's going to play. He's trending in the right direction. What are we thinking for the Packers wide receivers at this point at Carolina?
They're all banged up. I think Wicks is just more of a maintenance thing, but he's dealing with an ankle injury that he's been dealing with, I think, for the last couple of weeks. Both Watson and Reed, I believe, were limited. So keep an eye on that. But at this point, I would probably say in terms of who I expect to play, Wicks would be one, Reed probably 2, and then Watson 3.
Okay. And Michael Pittman, full participant in practice, still has not cleared the concussion protocol, but I know we've all got our fingers crossed for Michael Pittman to get back out there. He's got a good chance to do so. Still no Hunter Henry for the Patriots. Michael Mayer missed practice, but they play Monday, so time for him. And Luke Musgrave is eligible to come off IR. It's not a great matchup anyway, but if you were thinking about Tucker Kraft, just be aware there's a chance Luke Musgrave plays this week. On the offensive line, I think the Cowboys and the Dolphins might play 7-on-7. They don't really have any healthy linemen, but in seriousness, we talked about this game yesterday, so it looks like Zach Martin and Tyron Smith both might miss the game, with Martin having a better chance. And these are two Hall of Fame offensive linemen for the Cowboys, basically. So, Dave, are you thinking about downgrading Dak Prescott?
You have to, because we've seen it before from him. When he doesn't have a good offensive line, he struggles. And the Dolphins' pass defense, as good as it is, their pass rush is starting to generate a lot more pressure. I don't think the Cowboys can adapt the same way that the Dolphins did last week. And it's a shame, because you'd love to see these two teams play each other at full strength. And now we might be without so many key pieces on both offensive lines. It makes me nervous about Dak for sure.
How has Dak Prescott done this year without Tyron Smith? Week 3, they lost that game at Arizona, but I don't think Smith was the only lineman who was injured in that game. I think he was missing like 3 starters in that game. He scored 16.4 points. The next week against New England, not a terrible game, but he didn't get that second touchdown. I mean, 28 of 34 for 261 and 1, 16.3 fantasy points. So that's 2 games with 16 points, basically. And then he faced the Rams in week 8 coming off a bye. 4 touchdowns, 304 yards, 36.1 fantasy points without Tyron Smith against the Los Angeles Rams.
How did he do last week without Zach Martin on the field against Buffalo?
Yeah, there were a lot of issues there, but 6 points at Buffalo last week. Okay, and yeah, I mean, I'm keeping an eye on Jimmy Ward. I keep talking about how significant Jimmy Ward is for the Texans' pass defense. He practiced, so he has got a good chance to play against Cleveland. The Panthers are a little bit beat up, but I think it's actually some illnesses. Some of their best edge rushers missing with illnesses, specifically Brian Burns. Vita Vea. See, this is the Tampa Bay defense is healthy now. Big game for them. They got they're getting Vita Vea back, I believe. I think he was limited, but Devin White
played last week, Adam.
Oh, he did. I'm sorry. Okay,
I think he did.
Devin White. Okay, my bad. Devin White and Carlton Davis practiced in full, so they're getting healthy. And the Giants have a couple of defensive tackles that we should keep an eye on. Dexter Lawrence, who's been missing practice recently, and Raheem Nunes-Roches, who is practiced. They're in jeopardy, and that would be good for DeAndre Swift. Bills are also beat up, but I don't think that matters for the Chargers. And I mentioned this to Dave last night. There will be no commercial breaks in the fourth quarter of the Bills-Chargers game on Peacock. But there will be a commercial break right now, and we'll be back after this with one question for each game. Okay, commercial break, they're necessary. One question for each game. The Ravens are at the 49ers. These are the top 2 defenses in the NFL in points per game, not in yards per play. In yards per play, Baltimore is 1, and San Francisco is actually 12th. But the top 2 defenses in the NFL, Jamie, are we getting away from anybody that we would typically start on Baltimore or San Francisco?
I guess Zay Flowers would be the one if you're saying typically start. But everybody else, I'm starting all the main 49ers guys, and I'm starting Lamar Jackson. I don't know if Isaiah likely falls in the always start guys, but I would start him this week too.
Okay. Detroit at Minnesota. Dave, are we worried about the running backs in this game against 2 very good run defenses?
I'm not. I would rank them Gibbs, Montgomery, Chandler. But I think that they're all in play as at worst number 2 RBs. I just don't think there are enough running backs to take any of them out of the top 24. Would I say that any of them have a chance to do like what Ty Chandler did last week? I have a hard time believing that, but if there's one that I think did have a chance, it would be Gibbs, because he could be utilized more in the passing game than the other 2.
The only 2 running backs have scored more than 15.1 fantasy points against the Minnesota Vikings. And they were, if you remember the DeAndre Swift game back in week 2 or 3, and Christian McCaffrey was the other. So that's tough. You think Jahmyr Gibbs gets 15 plus PPR fantasy
I
points?
think he can get there.
Yeah.
I mean, we're still dealing with, at least in the case of the Lions, a very good offense and a very good offensive line. And yeah, I think you know kind of what to expect from Montgomery. He's the one that might make me the most nervous. A little too touchdown dependent at this point, but he gets a lot of work.
Yeah.
And Chandler's going to get a lot of work too, because I don't think Madison plays. And I don't think Kene Nwangu is going to take much work away from him either.
No, and the man, what is the stat I have on this game? It's like 22 or more carries for a running back in 4 of the last 5 games. No, it's 3 of the last 4 games for the Vikings. They have this many running back carries. Oh, no, it's 4 of the last 5. 25, 28, 25, and 24 running back carries in 4 of their last 5 games. That's 24 or more. And Chandler got all of them except for 1 last week. So they are trying to run the ball a lot. Now, Justin Jefferson's back. Well, we'll get in that game a little bit. But even last week with Jefferson, they ran the ball a ton. Colts are at the Falcons. Jamie, we got Drake London at home, but we don't have Desmond Ridder at home. Starter sit Drake London at home.
Love Drake London. 14.1 PPR points in his last 5 home games. At least 14.1 PPR points in his last 5 home games. Over 19 points on average in those 5 games. So he's been an absolute monster at home. And so, yes, quarterback change. Yes, tough defense. Colts have been really good against opposing wide receivers. I think they're number 10 in fewest points allowed to the position. But I'll take my chances with that guy at home. So, yeah, must-start guy. Top 12 receiver.
I'll save the quarterback stats for the Falcons when we get to that game.
Oh, what he's done with Drake London?
No, well, I mean, I have that. That won't impress you, but you might be more encouraged to start London when you hear the differences between Heineke and Ridder.
Yeah, well, now I have that don't impress me much in my head. So thank you.
Well, I mean, they're both unimpressive quarterbacks, but I'll tell you what the difference is between the two of them.
Little Shania now. All right, Jacksonville at Tampa Bay. Chris Godwin or Calvin Ridley? Who do you like better?
Godwin.
Yeah.
His target share the last 2 weeks is like 40%. It's not quite that high, but it's over 30%.
Oh, I think it's actually that might be his target per route run rate is like 39-40%.
Yeah, that's pretty great too. Anything over 25% there is good. When it's 10 percentage points higher than that, it's amazing. The question is whether or not they're going to keep doing it. My guess is that they will. Godwin looks healthy. He made some a lot of it. We talked about this on Sunday. A lot of it had to do with the Packers defense just playing poorly, but Jacksonville's defense has been playing poorly against the pass lately too. And so there's going to be huge opportunities, especially if the Bucs run defense is good. It's going to force, if the Jaguars run defense is good, it's going to force Baker to throw a little bit more. And Godwin's been really great lately, and he doesn't have CJ Beathard throwing to him.
Yeah, well, that's a big X factor. Jaguars have allowed more than 14 PPR fantasy points on receiving totals alone to 7 wide receivers in their last 7 games. Giants at the Eagles. Saquon Barkley or DeAndre Swift?
Barkley.
I also have Barkley higher.
That's close.
Yeah, I remember I said my gut was saying I wanted to go Swift over Barkley, but I look at Swift's game log. He is single-digit PPR points in 5 of the last 6 games. I think I'd have to back off on that gut feeling.
But if there's no Dexter Lawrence, you'll know that is important to the matchup. The Eagles will know that that's important to the matchup. And I think they want to keep running the ball. They did a good job of it against Seattle. So I don't think we can totally write off DeAndre Swift as a bad fantasy play. It's just, does he have the upside that Saquon has? And I think that's the discussion that we need to have.
It's that stupid tush push. Arizona at Chicago.
Listen, they had a change up to it last week where I think it was Swift who got the ball.
They gave it. Swift scored his most recent touchdown was on a tush push formation fake. Gave it to Swift and he ran it in. It was either his most recent or his second most recent. But still, he got down to the 1 yard line, maybe twice, definitely once in that Seattle game. And then they Hurtsed it in.
In Adam's fantasy league, he wants to award points for when a player is down at the 1.
Arizona I have Calvin Ridley. I'll take it. Arizona at Chicago. James Conner or one of these recently relevant running backs, or all of them. Chuba Hubbard against Green Bay, Devin Singletary against Cleveland, Ty Chandler against Detroit. Would you start Conner over any of them?
No.
All except Chandler.
I would go Chuba over him. That one's kind of easy for me. Chandler's easy for me if there's no Madison. Singletary's tough, but I would take my chances with Singletary over Connor this week.
No, I kind of like Connor.
I don't.
Why do you like him, Dave?
Because I think he's the main running back for Arizona. I think that offensive line certainly played well last week. I'm tired of doubting him. He went to Pittsburgh, had a monster game. Went to San Francisco, had a good game. Now he's playing Chicago. I don't think it's going to be a Bears blowout. Game script will favor him. He'll get a lot of work. The catches aren't great. He's averaging like 2.5 since he's come back from injury per game. And the yardage that comes with it is a joke. But I still think he's going to get a good amount of work. And I think he's got a decent shot to score. So when you line him up against all those other running backs that are touchdown dependent, I kind of put him at the top of the list. That has him at 22 for me in the in my PPR rankings.
He's more touchdown dependent than the other three guys you mentioned.
Well, I don't know. When's the last time Chuba even scored a touchdown?
Doesn't matter. He's been very good without the touchdowns.
He's been pretty good without the touchdowns. I don't know.
Well, you take away you don't give him a touchdown, and you take away James Conner's touchdown. Add the 3.
So who's been better?
By 2, and
that's a good question. Who's been better the last 2 weeks without touchdowns?
Chuba.
I don't know about that.
I don't think he's better.
The last 2 games without touchdowns.
You're saying if we take all the touchdowns away, so
Chuba hasn't scored, and he's been better.
Well, Chuba has
touchdowns.
11.6 and 11.6 and 12.3 PPR fantasy points in his last 2 games. Chuba Hubbard
without touchdowns.
Without touchdowns.
I think
Connor's probably I think you're probably right here. Yeah.
Singletary was awesome last week without a touchdown.
I actually think it's super close. It's super close. I think you're probably within 1 to 2 points over the last 2 games. But okay, fine.
Chuba had 11.6 and 12.3 without scoring a touchdown. Last week, James Conner had 11.9 without a touchdown. So, like, basically right in the middle of what Chuba had done the prior 2 games. Then I got to look up what he did in week 13. This is exciting. Week 13, James Conner had 22.5. You take away a touchdown from there, that's 16.5. That's better than what Chuba had been. To me, it's
Conner had 2 touchdowns.
He had 2 touchdowns, though.
Okay. I
Conner had 10.5 without the touchdown.
Okay, so that's lower than Chuba. It's very close between the 2.
All right, Green Bay at Carolina is our last game here for this segment. And that's another Chuba Hubbard question. Chuba Hubbard or Aaron Jones? Who do you like better in this game? We know the great matchup for Jones.
Jones. As long as Dylan's out. If Dylan's in, I'll take Chuba.
We talked about this on the live stream last night, how Matt LaFleur kind of lamented that he didn't give Jones more work after he got off to a hot start last week. And I would love to see that overcorrection by the coaching staff to feed Aaron Jones more. He looked good when he did get the ball in the first quarter, but A.J. Dillon's got to be out for me to really buy into Aaron Jones.
And by the way, my stat of the game for that game, I called it the stat of the game that makes me nervous because it might convince me to start Chuba Hubbard, which could go wrong because he's Chuba Hubbard. But the stat is that the Packers have allowed 18.6 or more PPR fantasy points to 5 running backs in their last 6 games. That's Jaylen Warren, Najee Harris, Isaiah Pacheco, Saquon Barkley, and Rachaad White. All of them scoring 18.6 or more PPR fantasy points. They all had 15 to 21 carries, and Chuba Hubbard's had 22 or more carries in 3 straight games. It is lining up. What's that?
He's been fantastic.
He has been, except they just have a bad offense, so he doesn't catch a lot of passes. The Panthers, though, they run the third most plays.
2 games ago?
Yeah, but almost his entire career, he just doesn't really catch a lot of passes. It's just he's just not good at it, I think. He had 4 catches in week 12. And for this season, he has 17 catches in 10 games. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm looking at James Conner. He had 5 catches in week 12. And for the season, he has 32 catches in 14 games. All right, that's it for one question for each game. Now let's go a little bit deeper into these games. We'll start with Baltimore at San Francisco. And I can't imagine anyone's taking Deebo Samuel out of their lineup. But I alluded to this on Wednesday when I tricked Dave with the game of the week thing, that there have only been 5 wide receivers who have had real big weeks, week-winning types of weeks, or close to that. More than 16.7 points against Baltimore. And they all had double-digit targets. And that has only happened once for Deebo and once for Ayuk. So again, no one's sitting Debo, but Ayuk's coming off a bad game, and he's really only had one big game in I think his last 7. He's usually in the 13, 14 point range, something like that. So against Baltimore, is Ayuk someone, Dave, that you struggle with at all? Is Ayuk someone that you no, I swear I'm not doing it.
I don't want you to do it because I think you'll beat a dead horse if you do it.
Exactly.
I don't struggle with Ayuk. I think he's going to be fine. He's got upside to get you at least 15 PPR points. He's done that 3 of his last 4. So I'm rolling with him. I'm liking him over Diggs, for example.
Oh, wow. Okay. It's just funny. It's almost like as we look at this game and you see the Niners are 5.5 point favorites. I just worry, are we disrespecting the Ravens defense, you know?
Oh, totally. But still, you have to buy into what San Francisco's done, and they're at home, and what they've done at home. Again, you go back to the Rams game a couple weeks ago.
Yep.
Yeah, I know.
They faced a good offense that was at full strength, and they got beat up on.
Fair. Okay. So how about all those running backs
too? Schematically, they're very similar.
The Chuba Hubbard, Ty Chandler, Aaron Jones, James Conner group. Would you start them over Brandon Ayuk?
No.
All right. I'm not going to linger on this game if we don't have to, just because we love the game and we can't wait for it. By the way, who are you guys picking with the spread? Niners. -5.5.
Niners. There are some tough calls here. I mean, Gus Edwards is now the main guy in Baltimore.
Yeah.
Likely, obviously, coming off 2 strong games. They're facing a very good defense. Do we know the status of Armstead and Hargrave?
Did not practice.
Yeah, that's big.
But this was their first practice of the week. But Oren Burks, another kind of a reserve linebacker, who plays a little bit. He also didn't practice. But that's two great defensive linemen that did not play last week, and they got destroyed by the Cardinals.
Big reason why Connor had a good game.
Yeah, and DeMercado had a 40-yard run. So yeah, how much would that change things for Gus Edwards for you?
I don't mind Gus as a flex. I don't want to trust him as a must-start guy. But I mean, you saw after the injury, they went right back to him. Justice Hill has kind of been what I think will continue to be what he's been, which is 7 to 10 touches at best for what they're looking at. They're going to try and run the ball. I mean, especially if those guys are not there, that's what they're going to do. They don't want to necessarily put it all on Lamar and make him have to win the game for him. Not that I don't think he can, because he's capable of doing that against anybody. But I would imagine if they can get Gus in the 20 touch range, I think there's a stat. I'll go back and look at it. There's a stat of how many carries he gets to what their win-loss record is. Makes a lot of sense. Obviously when he's rolling it works out. But if you're stuck at running back this week, I don't think he's a bad play. He's obviously not going to catch a lot of passes, but they get near the goal line, they've been running the ball, and I think he'll have an opportunity to do so. He had 10 touchdowns or 9 touchdowns in that 5-game streak. Not awful now that Mitchell's out of the way. So
define stuck. Like, you have him ranked ahead of James Conner? Because I do.
No. Yes, in non-PPR I do.
Okay. What about Deontay Foreman?
Oh, Gus, easy.
Najee.
No, I like Najee this week.
Okay.
Yeah, no DJ Reader. I like him this week.
We're totally backward on how we feel about Gus. I agree that he's a good fill-in running back, but I'm looking at my PPR rankings. The only running back I would consider starting him over is Najee, because I don't care if DJ Reader's playing, not playing. I just don't think Najee's rolling well right now. And with the Steelers talking about making all these changes, I wonder if that includes at running back, and they use our guy
Warren a little more. Foreman also.
Yeah. All right. By the way, people are asking why there's no Game of the Week song right now. I did it on Wednesday in case you missed it, but I'm glad people are still into it. Okay, fill in the blank. I would start these quarterbacks over Brock Purdy.
Okay. Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen.
I would start these quarterbacks over Lamar Jackson.
Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Brock Purdy.
Justin Fields also.
Okay. He's so annoying. He should be so much better every week. Yeah, Lamar.
Yeah, of course he should be, but
he should be so much better every week. It's so frustrating.
Little mistakes every game or every other game kind of cost him.
But
but in the games where you see him having like 30 plus fantasy points, those are like the games where he's awesome. There's a couple, like the first Pittsburgh game, he was outstanding. His receivers cost him numbers.
Yes.
But you can't, he's an MVP candidate for a reason. He's having a really good year statistically. When you look at him throwing the football, completion rate's great. Is he running the ball as much as we thought that he would? Maybe not quite as much. Last week notwithstanding. But he's how they're going to win this game. That's not an obvious statement at all, right? Huh? But I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up like exploding on the ground this week.
And which tight end do you like better?
Oh, I should say likely. I have Kittle ranked higher, but I kind of like likely more. I love that he's running more routes than everybody except for Zay Flowers. I like the way that he's like a big bodied option, red zone option. Seems to be on the same page with Lamar. Adam, this is your cue to play the music again.
I'm not honestly, I'm not playing. So
Okay.
the thing I mentioned about Kittle last week is that he, much more so than Ayuk or Debo, is very much tied to how many yards Brock Purdy throws for. And just looking at the game log for Purdy, when he hits 270 or more yards, George Kittle has a great game almost every time. When he throws for fewer than that, for fewer than 270 yards, he struggles. And last week, he had 54 yards on 4 targets, and Purdy had 242 yards at Arizona. I can't sit here and tell you when he's going to throw 270, but I can tell you that's kind of what's been going on with George Kittle. 270 against the Ravens is going to be tough, but Purdy can obviously do it. All right, and the DSTs, do you guys like either of these DSTs?
No.
I like the Niners because I think they can get some turnovers and sacks. I do not like the Ravens DST.
What if Armstead and Hargrave are out?
Still no.
Still going to start the Niners.
Okay.
Okay.
There's so many better DST options you could pick up this week.
So that's the thing. Like, I would agree. Like, if you can find the Bears DST, the Colts DST, I would start them over the 49ers.
Broncos better this week.
Yeah, that's another one. That's fair. I don't know if they're out there, though. Are the Bills still out there?
For 2 weeks.
No.
Bills are not out there. You get those guys for 2 weeks.
Yep, I agree.
Detroit at Minnesota.
2 DSTs I would not want to use this week.
I already gave a stat of the game. It's the Minnesota running back carries in their last 5 games. They're 13th in run rate in those 5 games. And I do think that, obviously got to point out Justin Jefferson didn't play in 3.75 of them, but they are maybe changing it without Kirk Cousins. And that's good. You need carries against Detroit. All right. So how do you rank you rank them? Gibbs, Chandler, Montgomery?
No. I've
PPR, yes.
Montgomery, Chandler.
PPR, it's Gibbs, Chandler, Montgomery.
All right, talk to me about Gibbs and Montgomery.
That's if Madison's out.
Gibbs really doesn't get a ton of touches, but he's so good. And Montgomery, obviously, kind of know what he is. 3 straight games with right around 12 PPR fantasy points, but 3 games before that, he was more like 17. But we know he needs to score. But yeah, I mean, Jamie, you talked to me about the Detroit running backs and the confidence level you have in them. And again, a tough matchup.
I think for Gibbs, it's just, you're looking at the big play potential. You're looking at, when he's involved in the passing game, he's been fantastic. Can win your fantasy week on one play. It's a tough matchup, but I'm still starting him without really hesitation. He's a top 12 running back. Montgomery said it. He's got to score. And so this run defense has been fantastic, really, for the majority of the season. But we know what Detroit's offense is like when their offensive line is healthy. And Ragnow back last week was, a big boost to that, even though Montgomery didn't score, still got you 11 PPR points, I believe it was. So, yeah, those guys are kind of easy to figure out at this point. I think Montgomery just more of a number 2 running back, better in non-PPR than full, just with the touchdown potential. And then for Chandler, you saw the usage last week. Kevin O'Connell just continues to rave about him as the week goes on, maybe more so because of Madison seemingly not being able to go. But that was their best running back performance of the season by a mile. And I think with the quarterback change to Mullins and the fact that Dobbs was not necessarily going to throw to his running backs, where Mullins, I think, will because he's more of a statue back there, that will help his role in the passing game. So that's why I would take him over Montgomery and his usage. He's not coming off the field really for anybody. Whereas you could see, Gibbs and Montgomery continue to split.
I'm just worried that a lot of Chandler's production was because of the matchup last week.
Sure, Reader being up. That's why.
And I think that the line, even if Reader had played, I still think that Chandler would have had a good game, probably not as good as he actually had. Lions have only allowed 5 running backs to have 12 or more PPR points against them. Only 3 have had 100 total yards. Only 7 running backs have 10 or more PPR points, none in the past 2 games. It makes me a little worried about Chandler. I get where you're coming from with Montgomery, starting Chandler over Montgomery, because Montgomery himself, good rushing metrics, and he gets a lot of work, but he hasn't been delivering the touchdowns, and that's the thing. So I go back and forth between those two as well. I wonder if Chandler kind of has a down game because of the matchup this week.
Well, I mean, look, let's face it, they're both facing tough run defenses. So these are 2 of the best in the league.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of who you feel has more potential. And like I said, I'll go with Chandler getting a few more catches than Montgomery, and that's why I would take the edge over him.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting with the Lions, right? Dave just gave some stats about how good they've been against running backs, but in their last 8 games, they've allowed 4 running backs to score 16.8 or more PPR fantasy points, and they all scored. So that's always a big factor here. But they played 2 games without defensive tackle Aleem McNeil. And in the first game, they gave up 4.6 yards per carry to Deontay Foreman. And you look and you say, oh, maybe it was a pretty big deal. And then the next game, they completely dominated, 3.3 yards per carry to the Denver running backs, much worse than that for Javonte Williams specifically. So, but I haven't ruled out the possibility that they are going to struggle a little bit without Aleem McNeil, who apparently was their best run stuffer on that defensive line. So we've only seen 2 games, 1 good, 1 bad. But I just want to throw that out there as maybe a bonus for Ty Chandler. Jefferson and Amon-Ra St. Brown are easy, right? Obvious must starts.
Starting them.
I was actually a little surprised by your Jordan Addison rankings. Surprised to see him in the top 30. A little bit of confidence there in him after the 2 touchdown game.
Well, it's the matchup. It's the Lions cornerbacks versus Jordan Addison, and Addison being able to shake free, and Mullins giving us, or at least giving me confidence that he can locate and throw to Addison. Now, there is a wrinkle that we have to talk about. There's a chance C.J. Gardner-Johnson plays for the Lions, and that could take away the middle of the field, which has been open for a lot of pass catchers against Detroit lately. But I still love those perimeter receivers, because even though they can break in on routes like Jefferson does all the time, they can still possibly, they won't see Gardner-Johnson as much. So still like Jefferson a ton, and Addison's got the matchup. He'll have those outside matchups for sure.
It's also the Hawkinson revenge game.
Yes, I was about to say that. Which tight end do you guys like better?
Laporta, but it's close.
The door.
That would be La Puerta.
In Italian, Laporta.
Oh, okay. Hawkinson, Laporta. I'm guessing McBride and Kelsey are ahead of them. Anyone else?
In PPR, they are.
Anyone else? Or are they 3 and 4?
No, those are my top 4.
Yep.
Those are your top.
The Joker right behind them at 5.
Gotcha. Quarterbacks in this game, they're on a different level here, but do you like Goff? This Minnesota, very tough matchup. I know that you had Jake Browning with the 2 touchdowns, one of them a prayer, but he was the first quarterback to do well in about 2 months against Minnesota. Goff coming off a 41-point game. Starter sit Jared Goff, and then we'll get to Mullins.
He's a starter, low-end starter. But indoors, his last 2 indoor road games, he's been good. So you don't have to worry about that. Yes, it's a tough matchup. I know it's a different defense, but he did really well against Minnesota, for example, last year. So somewhat of the same personnel, but different scheme. But in any event, I think as long as his offensive line is healthy, you trust Jared Goff, especially if there's no weather conditions. And he doesn't have any weather conditions for the rest of the season. So I think he's still a top 10 quarterback. And Mullins, he's coming off a 21-point game. The way to beat the Lions is not to necessarily run on them, it's to throw on them. And with everybody healthy, Jefferson, Addison, and Hawkinson should be able to have some success against this Detroit defense.
I've got Mullins just outside my top 12. Jared Goff is inside my top 10. Can you run me down the list of the quarterbacks that the Vikings have done a good job against in the last 5 weeks?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. Brock Purdy, last 5 weeks, so I'll go back to Brock Purdy, 13 points. Jordan Love, 16 points. Taylor Heineke, 16. Saints quarterbacks 17, Russell Wilson 16, Justin Fields 9. Remember that game Monday night?
Yep.
Aiden O'Connell 4, and then Jake Browning 22. I mean, that's really impressive. I know there are some duds there, but there's Purdy with 13, Love with 16, Wilson 16, Fields with 9, and with 59 rushing yards, he scored 9 points. Oh.
I would just argue that aside from Purdy, Goff is a step up from all those others as a passer, and that makes me kind of believe in him a little bit more. We've seen Hurts, Herbert, Mahomes. They've had at least 23 fantasy points. We just saw Browning have 22, and he was attacking them downfield. And so I just wonder if Goff has too many weapons and isn't just so in sync with this offense right now that you just can't get away from him. It would be different if his offensive line was bad, but it's not.
Mullins or Flacco?
They're back-to-back for me. I go Flacco.
I'm the same way, but I'm going to reserve the right to change my mind because Flacco looked so terrible last week. It was so bad.
Mullins or Jordan Love?
Mullins.
Agreed.
All right, I think we're done with this game. Let's go to our next one. In my notes here, where's my notes? We have the next game, which is oh, there it is. Indianapolis at Atlanta. I got a lot of notes. How many? I have 33,656 words in this document. Gardner Minshew. Any interest? Starter sit Gardner Minshew coming off a nice 26.6 point game against the Steelers.
Oh.
He's in a better standing with Pittman healthy, but there are just a lot of good quarterbacks this week. So we've seen Minshew with a healthy Jonathan Taylor, and he hasn't exactly put up a lot of great numbers. And so with Taylor back, I would lean away from starting him, but super flex 2 QB if you need a guy and he's been on your bench. I think it's a decent start this week. I start him over Russ. I start him over Kyler. Borderline between him and Jordan Love, but I might lean Love. But still, with Minshew, with Pittman back, it makes it a lot easier to trust Minshew if you need to.
Mullins and Browning ahead of Minshew for me.
As it stands now, it looks like Jonathan Taylor will play and Zach Moss will not. So all the running backs that we've been talking about, like Zeke and Ty Chandler and Chuba Hubbard, but it's obviously we're going Taylor over them, right? And
you said it. Your bold prediction. He's going to be the first one to score a rushing touchdown against them.
I mean, I would personally start him over Barkley and ETN. Would you?
Easy.
Yes.
How about the starting Seahawks running back or Jonathan Taylor?
I have Taylor right now ahead of Walker, but it's close.
Same.
All right. Michael Pittman. This is a tough matchup. They give up the fewest fantasy points to wide receivers, Atlanta, and the second fewest fantasy. Yeah, and the second fewest fantasy points to running backs. I was going to say so, but yeah, start Pittman. If he does not play, is there any Colts receiver or tight end that you just say no so we can move on?
No. Alec Pierce would be the DFS tournament dart throw.
Okay. Sit Taylor Heineke. All right, I'll get to Bijan in a second. Dave, Jamie already said he's excited about Drake London. What did you want to say about the quarterbacks?
Heineke challenges downfield more. He's got a higher ADOT on his throws. He's got a higher pass attempt of 15-plus air yards than Ritter does. He's got a lower interception rate than Ritter does and a higher touchdown rate than Ritter does. They've only played, I think it's 23 snaps together, Heineke and Drake London. 3 targets, that's it, 2 catches for 28 yards. But I'm encouraged by Heineke being more willing to fire downfield and London being there, and London can dominate in one-on-one opportunities because he's got this gargantuan size. So you should be encouraged to start Drake London. Don't know if I love him as a top 12 wide receiver. I think that's where Jamie's got him. I appreciate the boldness, but he should be in the majority of fantasy lineups, especially in PPR leagues.
Let's talk about Bijan Robinson now. Well, before we do that, I'll just say Kyle Pitts is not ranked as a starter, so don't start him.
No, but he's got a little bit of an edge with Heineke too.
He did against Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It basically was only one full game of Heineke. Heineke came in the fourth quarter against Tennessee, played a full game against Minnesota, and then he was terrible against, I think it was Arizona, and he hurt his hamstring and he left. But he didn't throw that much. They ran the ball all over Arizona. Okay, anyway, the Colts give up the 3rd most fantasy points to running backs, the 5th most receiving yards to running backs. However, how about this? When Grover Stewart plays, and Super Grover is going to play 3.3 3.5 yards per carry allowed to running backs. When he doesn't play, 4.6 yards per carry. And those are big sample sizes. That's 8 games with him and 6 games without him. It's a little bit more than a yard better. So that's bad. However, are you guys feeling good about Bijan this week?
He's another one of those Barkley, ETN, Derrick Henry. I don't know who else you want to put in that canoe. But not exactly someone you could sit, but not someone that you should say is going to win you your week.
Number 2 running back.
Yep.
So of those 4 running backs, Bijan, ETN, Henry, Barkley, who do you have the most confidence in?
ETN.
Bijan, Barkley, ETN, and whom?
Henry.
I have Barkley the highest against Philadelphia.
Okay. I would say Bijan.
I mean, look, that's kind of where it is. The best matchup is Henry.
Right. Yeah. Oh man. Like Henry. Yeah. I don't know. I have so much faith in Bijan, but I think it's being tested. He did 2 weeks ago. He scored 19.8 fantasy points against the Bucs. Last week, he scored 0.4 fantasy points at Carolina. And in his last 5 games,
PPR or non-PPR was negative fantasy points.
Half PPR was negative. It was
half
negative.
PPR. Yeah, I know. That's why I said half PPR.
Oh, I thought you said non. Sorry.
It's okay.
And
he absolutely sucked.
But
go ahead.
3 of his last 5 games, he's got more than 17 points. So that's good.
It's good.
Again, you're not benching any of these guys. For the most
No, but
part.
you might have to make a decision between these guys.
Yeah,
like, you could have gotten to the fantasy playoffs with Barkley, Bijan, and I don't know who the third guy would be.
Any of those guys. Yep.
Right.
Yeah. So for me, Dave, and this is tough this time of year because I don't necessarily treat these shows like I would in week 8 when you're talking to an entire league. You're talking to the best teams that are remaining. And I just assume that they have tough calls as they have the best players. So that's why, I would probably just have moved on from Bijan, be like, he's the number 2 running back, whatever. But I feel like a lot of Bijan managers might have better options. Is Drake London a better option than Bijan Robinson?
As a flex, yes. Absolutely.
They're really close, but I have Bijan higher.
All right. Let's take a break. We got Jacksonville at Tampa Bay. We got 4 games left. When we come back, we'll be right back on Fantasy Football Today. Jacksonville's at Tampa Bay. Here's why I'm getting the heebie-jeebies on Travis Etienne. In his last 6 games, he has scored more than 12.6 PPR fantasy points only twice, and those are his only 2 games with a touchdown in that stretch. He has become a touchdown-dependent running back. In the other 4 games, without the touchdowns, he scored 6.4, 8.9, 12.6, and 9.9 PPR fantasy points. That's 3 really bad games. Travis Etienne has gained fewer than 60 total yards in 3 of his last 5 games. He has 1 run longer than 16 yards in his last 8 games. And he's averaging 3.3 yards per carry in his last 9 games. And he doesn't have Trevor Lawrence. I don't think that's good unless there are a lot of dump-offs. That's the only thing I could see.
That's what I would expect. I would expect this to be a very Travis Etienne game for the Jaguars, because why would you put it on CJ Beathard to try to win the game?
Yeah, I just don't know that he can get it done. I think this is going to be a really good run defense again. They're healthy. They got their linebackers back.
You can't say healthy because Devin White was a healthy scratch.
Okay, that's true. But
yeah, but how much of a difference maker is he? Like, what are their numbers?
He might be worse, but it's still, you keep mentioning he's back. He was back last week and they decided to bench him.
No, but he was not the only linebacker that missed time recently, right?
Right, Levante David matters.
But
more.
David's been back for
Vea matters more.
Right, but now Vea and David are back, and they are just healthy on defense.
Yeah, no, Vea is huge, literally and figuratively.
Yes, I've seen him.
But I think in terms of what he can do in the passing game, I would expect Doug Peterson to make this a lot about Travis Etienne. You have to. Like, why would you put it on CJ Beathard? There's no Christian Kirk. Zay Jones is banged up. Like, it's let Beathard go out there and try and just chuck it to Evan Ingram and Calvin Ridley all day, or try and slow the game down a little bit, especially with the way the Bucs offense has been.
All makes sense. They've used what's been the usage for Travis Etienne over the past few weeks.
But Trevor Lawrence has been healthy, so it doesn't really matter.
Well, no, because we're seeing I want to see what the usage has been and like what the numbers have been with him.
Not great. He gets
No,
4
like he
catches.
had one game with 18 touches against Cleveland, and he had over 17 PPR points. That felt good. Fantasy manager saw the touchdown. That was a good game against a tough defense. He had 15 touches against Cincinnati, a lesser defense, high scoring game, scored in that game, 17.9 PPR points.
Yeah.
You could almost put him in the same situation as the other running backs that we talked about before, but he's got more upside because we know he's a faster player. And
We
he
have
can
put him
break
in
away.
that situation.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm hoping look, he does get 3 to 4 catches basically every week. So maybe he'll get more. Hopefully that would be a safety blanket and would really help him. Are any confidence in anyone in the passing game for the Jaguars? It is a great matchup.
I think you look at Ridley as the high end number 3 receiver. He's certainly better if Lawrence plays. And Ingram, again, are you starting Isaiah Likely over Evan Ingram? I think if Likely had a better matchup, you might go that route, but not for me. He's been awesome since Christian Kirk has been out, and now Zay Jones may not play. So, I think you just look at Ingram as a plug and play, set and forget it tight end and not worry about it. You'd feel a lot better about all these guys if Lawrence is out there. Parker Washington would be a decent, pickup for this week. Jamal Agnew, if you're looking for a desperation play, might be decent this week.
I think Beathard is going to be a little more careful than Trevor Lawrence has been. The career numbers on Beathard, 60% completion rate, 59.5 if we want to get specific, 6.9 yards per attempt, touchdown rate is 3.4, ADOT is 7.2%. I went back and watched some games of his a few weeks ago because I thought Lawrence was going to miss it with the ankle, and he doesn't have the best arm. I mean, he's a backup for a reason. And so I wonder if he is more of a caretaker and checks down. And if he does, given the matchup, I kind of like Ingram a lot because I think he could get a lot of targets and pick up some decent numbers that way. And Ridley, between the mistakes that he makes and the fact that he's got a quarterback that doesn't have as much confidence in his arm and might not see the field the same way that Lawrence does, certainly doesn't have the same velocity as Lawrence does, no better than what Jamie said, which is a high-end number 3 wide receiver.
Let's not forget, Doug Peterson, once upon a time, won a Super Bowl with a backup quarterback.
Yeah,
that quarterback had a better arm than this one.
Yeah. Baker Mayfield, you guys are pretty confident in. He's top 9 for everyone, for Dave, Jamie, and Heath. And I guess I keep bringing up the pass attempts. That doesn't seem to matter.
For you guys. Jacksonville defense is so bad. They're not getting great pressure on the quarterback. They're trying, but they're not. Last week was a little bit of a different story. Okay, last week they were definitely in Lamar Jackson's kitchen, and Lamar just got out of every situation. I don't expect Baker to do that. But I think Baker still on 30 to 33 pass attempts can find 2 touchdowns. And the way that Godwin's been playing, the way that Evans has played over the balance of the season, I think there's some big yardage that could be there. Maybe not 300 yards, but 250, 275, somewhere in that range. Hopefully no turnovers.
Okay. And the numbers I keep giving is that he's thrown 30 or fewer passes in 5 of his last 6 games. They've been very, very run heavy lately. You're getting 20 carries basically on a weekly basis from Rachaad White. He's running the ball well. We're obviously people are expecting. I think the Jaguars could easily win this game. It's only a 3-point spread, but the Bucs obviously are favorites at home, coming out on a 3-game win streak here. So pass volume does concern me a little bit, but it's very concentrated. I mean, that's a good thing for Godwin if he gets the targets, and Evans. We haven't really seen both of them get a lot of targets, right? It's like Evans is taking a step back as Godwin. Godwin, where did he crack your top 20, Chris Godwin?
PPR, he's right there. Non-PPR, he's just outside.
Yeah, he's 23rd for me in PPR.
Before I move on to Godwin, I'm sorry. Who are some quarterbacks you would start Baker Mayfield over?
Love, Tua. Kyler, Gino, Flacco, Tua.
Assuming Tyreek Hill plays, you're still starting Mayfield over Tua?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Chris Godwin or I hope I didn't ask you this. Drake London.
London.
Chris Godwin or Nico Collins.
Godwin and PPR, Collins and none.
Jamie, do you have London over Mike Evans too?
No.
Okay. Yeah, Mike Evans, is he still top, 8, whatever?
Yes.
10, whatever. Okay.
Jacksonville's bad.
It's true.
But Cisco and Campbell, 2 starters in their secondary, both limited in practice on Wednesday and Thursday. So they could be getting those 2 pieces back. Rashad White's top 6 in both formats. Start Mike Evans.
I almost was tempted to put White 1 ahead of McCaffrey this week. It's so good.
Oh yeah, he's incredible. It's amazing.
I mean, they if there is a chance for a record in receptions for a running back, it could happen this week. Jacksonville is that bad, and that's what Rashad White just lives.
But he doesn't lately. That's the funny thing is he's been.
But this is the week though.
That's true. That's the great thing about White. If they're in a good game script, they will rely on him with carries. If they're not, they will rely on him with catches. He is perfect. All right. Last thing here was: would you start Godwin over ETN, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, and the 4th guy in there? Oh, Bijan.
I think Henry's the only one that I would start him over in full PPR.
Who'd you ask? I'm sorry.
Those 4 running backs: ETN, the heebie-jeebies, Barkley, ETN, Henry,
the heebie-jeebie canoe,
and Bijan. Yeah.
And who over who?
Godwin. Would you start Godwin over any?
In PPR, no.
Okay.
Not PPR, definitely not.
Yeah. Like, you don't want to get too excited about Godwin, right? Because 2 weeks ago, he had 11 targets. It was 5 catches for 53 yards.
Yep.
So you don't want to get too, but I'd say
3 games ago was even worse.
Well, he had 5 catches for 53 yards. And then the game before is when he had his rushing touchdown.
But 3 targets and no catches.
Pretty safe floor of having around 10 PPR points. I think you can guarantee yourself that with Godwin. But the breakout games have been few and far between this year. We'll see if it continues.
He's had 2 great games. One came when Mike Evans left.
Absolutely. Yep. Giants are at the Eagles. Here's how the Giants do against elite teams this year. They lost by 40 to Dallas, by 18 to the 49ers, by 15 at Miami, and they had a pick 6 in the end zone in that game. So that could have been a lot worse. That was a 14-point swing. They lost by 5 at Buffalo. That was good. And they lost by 23 at Dallas. These teams destroy the Giants, and it's usually really bad for them in fantasy. So, yeah, I've got more stats here, but I'll just shut up and let you guys talk. Your thoughts on is this game pretty easy? You just like start all Eagles?
Well, Devontae Smith, you got to keep an eye on his knee. Hopefully he's okay. And I think that kind of sways Dallas Goedert. If Goddard does not have Devontae Smith, you got to be a little bit more encouraged by it. If there is Devontae Smith, Goddard has a terrible history against the Giants. In his last 5 games, it's like 17 catches, 140 yards, I think it is.
Really?
And no touchdowns. And obviously he's not played great the last 2 games since coming back from the injury. But should be a decent game for DeAndre Swift, unless, of course, Mr. Boston Scott comes to play. You want your stats?
Yeah, let's
please. This is fun.
All right, let me find it. Just give me 1 sec. Talk about something else.
I'll add this with Goddard. The Giants have allowed 8.6 or fewer half PPR points to a tight end in 9 of 12 games. Juwan Johnson had 10 in week 15. You'd have to go back to week 10 to find another tight end that did well. It was Jake Ferguson. So tough matchup. Jamie mentioned the history, and we've seen Dallas Goedert take a big time back seat since coming back from his injury.
I have to disagree a little bit though. Tucker Kraft and Juwan Johnson were fine.
No, I mentioned Juwan Johnson had 10 half PPR points, and Tucker Kraft had 10 PPR points. That's
10.4, I think. So the Giants have given up 10.4 to 12.6 full PPR fantasy points to a tight end in 4 of their last 5 games. They have only given up 1 big game to a tight end all year. It was George Kittle.
So it's more about the catches than it is them like being leaky yardage wise. And then Juwan Johnson with the touchdown last week.
I think the Giants defense, which has been a little confusing,
and Jimmy Graham,
is totally a home road thing. I mean, they are much, much better at home. This is a road game. Their defense stinks on the road, as we saw last week.
All right, here's Boston Scott. 8 games against Giants in his career. 86 carries, 414 yards, 9 touchdowns, 17 catches, 222 yards, and 1 touchdown on 22 targets. He has a touchdown in 8 games in a row against them going back to 2019.
Does that include the playoff game?
I did not include the playoff game. That's only regular season.
Okay.
And now he's playing at home against this team on Christmas. And
He's not.
everybody knows about like Boston Scott's great against the Giants.
By
Would
the
it
way,
surprise
Jamie,
you if he had a touchdown?
he scored in the playoff game.
Would it
6
surprise
carries,
you? If
30 yards.
would it surprise you if he had 1 carry for 1 yard? All right, start over. 1 carry for 2 yards and a touchdown.
It would be just fantastic if they just did the tush push with him once. Not for anybody that's clearly starting Jalen Hurts because you want him to get those points. But if this is a blowout, Boston, you're in.
I
How
think
you
he could
feel
score
about,
the first touchdown of the game.
how you feel about Darren Waller?
Low end starter. I mean, again, you're talking about a bad secondary that hopefully this is where, the Giants can have some success and keep this game competitive. You saw last week 4 for 40. It's funny because I'm hoping the same thing. It's totally random, but just it was the exact same stats and targets. Isaiah Likely's first game without Mark Andrews was 4 for 40 on 6 targets, and that was Waller's exact stat line when he came back, and then he blew up afterwards. So, it just because I kept referencing that for like 2 weeks because of the waiver wire column. I just hope he's more involved. Look, he looked okay in his first game back. They clearly need help everywhere. And so, DeVito is going to be under a lot of duress and, chasing points. And so should be an uptick in targets. If he can get double digits in targets, he should have an opportunity to play well. Will he score? Who knows? But low end tight end 1, I think he falls in that range.
And you'd start him over Goddard, I would assume.
Unless Smith is out, yes.
Yeah, I would rank it likely Waller, Goddard, assuming Devontae Smith plays.
Yeah, agree.
Dave, you're the high guy on Barkley. I've been in your top 10. You want to? The Eagles have been very bad, quite frankly, against running backs.
Yeah,
lately 6 of the last running backs. 6 of the last 8. So whatever. There's a stat in there somewhere, but they've been last 3 running backs. McCaffrey 22 points.
right.
Pollard 16.6. He had 7 catches. Ken Walker 20.2. Yeah. Go ahead. You want to make the case for Barkley?
The case for Barkley is that he gets more work this week than last week, and the matchup isn't as unfavorable as it looked like a month ago. You just talked about how running backs have been doing against them. The thing that I just took a look at, and this is in the first half last week, Saquon was not on the field for third downs.
Right.
So he played about 2/3 of the snaps in the first half of the game, but it was Matt Breida on third down. So there was a change there in how they were using him. I wonder if he's not at 100%. And if we knew that for sure he wasn't at 100%, there's no way that he should be in the heebie-jeebie canoe. He should be floating behind the canoe, clearly with heebies and jeebies.
Read the list of running backs that have done well against them.
McCaffrey, Pollard, Kenneth Walker.
Yeah, and 2 of those obviously great offenses. One, you got to figure the Eagles have just been beat up and tired. I mean, the stretch of games that they had was ridiculous. Yeah. And so, not that they're rested, but to come back home and have to face this team, I mean, look at the spread. This is going to be a blowout. And so, how much is Barkley playing in the second half of this? So, must sit guy? No. Must start guy? Barely.
Barkley has 7 touchdowns this year. They came in 4 games. Arizona, which is the best matchup. Washington twice, which is one of the best. And Green Bay, which is becoming a really good one for running backs too. He just has a lot of really disappointing games, and DeVito doesn't really throw the ball to him that much. Doesn't throw the ball that much to begin with. All right, for the Eagles, Jalen Hurts is like a top 2 quarterback. He should get back on track. Dave mentioned it on the live stream last night. He hasn't been completing the deep ball. That was mostly last week. He went 0 for 4 on pass attempts of 20 or more air yards. Remember, he's playing sick. So we'll see if we can get back to that. DeAndre Swift. So where's Swift rank with the Aaron Joneses and the Chuba Hubbards and the Devin Singletaries of the world? DeAndre Swift this week.
He's right behind, but I think I'm gonna change your mind, Adam. Play Swift over Barkley.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't have that actual decision, but I do have. I know I'm starting him over Eckler. So
I like that. Swift over Eckler.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that this is where Saquon comes into play. Like if we're worried about Eckler because he hasn't looked right and he's not getting the workload that we're used to seeing, and he's going to get blown out. And so what's the difference between that and Barkley? Like I'm thinking about this right now, recognizing that I've got Saquon too high. But like if I knew that Saquon wasn't going to, if he was going to have the same type of workload this week as last week, I'd still start him over Eckler. But this is when I would get nervous about Saquon being a good fantasy start.
All right, we have 2 games left. We got to get going a little bit here. But so my last question for this is, first of all, you guys do like the Eagles DST. Jamie and Heath love the Eagles DST. Dave has them 7th, I believe.
I've moved them up. They're top 5.
Okay. And then Devontae Smith, is he, if he plays, is he a must start?
He's
As
the
the
number
number
2
2
receiver.
receiver.
All right. Arizona's at Chicago. The Bears have 12 interceptions in their last 4 games. Holy cow.
Yeah.
We have talked a lot about James Conner. Conner or Swift?
Swift.
I have Conner higher.
If you want to hear more about James Conner, we did a tough calls segment on Wednesday about him. We talked about him earlier on this show in one question for each game. Dave likes him more than Jamie does. Kyler Murray is a sit. He's like 20th. Sit him. Not going to start. I don't even know which wide receivers are going to play for the Cardinals. So it's just Trey McBride basically is the only must start for the Cardinals, and he's number 1 or number 2 in the rankings, depending on the analyst. All right, Jamie, you seem to have a good deal of confidence in Justin Fields. You have him 5th. Dave has him 9th. You can have the first word on Fields.
I mean, the Cardinals are terrible, so it's easy for Fields to have some success here. He's done well in these type of matchups. Last week was a tough matchup for him against Cleveland. His stat line would have looked so much better if, first off, Robert Tonyan catches that ball down the right sideline. Would have been a 70-yard touchdown for him. I hope, I haven't checked lately, but the stat correction should have come that the first interception should not have counted because it was dropped on the Hail Mary at the end of the first half. But in any event, he'll get back to running. Only 30 yards rushing last week. He's been over 50 each of the last 2 weeks. I just think they're going to have the ball all day, and the Bears should be able to do whatever they want to against the Cardinals defense. So DJ Moore, huge game coming. Hopefully Cole Kmet as well. They should be able to run the ball also. I just think this could be a Bears blowout.
And Dave, you're a little lower on Justin Fields with him 9th. That's behind Lamar Jackson, Baker Mayfield, Jared Goff.
It's not because of the matchup. It's not because I think that the Cardinals defense is good. I think the Bears are going to be able to run the ball well. So Deontay Foreman's kind of like a sleeper for me. Cardinals have allowed 4.6 yards per rush on the season, but 5.7 yards per rush in their past 4 games. Fields attempted 40 passes last week. He only completed 19 of them. Should have been 21, as Jamie alluded to, but I still feel like the Bears want to get back to being balanced. So I'm a little more cautious about Justin Fields, but he's still top 10 for me and still somebody that I've got confidence in coming through for a good fantasy game.
DJ Moore is a must-start guy, but it's kind of weird. The Cardinals, in their last 5 games, they've held Drake London to 6.6 points, Puka to 6.7, Kupp to 4.8, Ayuk to 6.7. It's been a little strange, but start DJ Moore. And, how about Cole Kmet? Is Cole Kmet ahead of, say, I think it was likely Waller? Is Kmet ahead of them?
Yeah.
1 spot ahead. I might move likely ahead of him.
This on paper is a tough matchup. They're 4th best.
Yeah, I like likely better than Kmet, but he's right in that range.
Okay. Arizona's actually held Mark Andrews, Dalton Schultz, George Kittle twice, Logan Thomas, Jake Ferguson, Kyle Pitts, David Njoku, and Pat Freiermuth to fewer than 50 yards. Some of them did score, though. And we like the Bears DST. And our last game is Green Bay at Carolina. All right. One more time. Last time for the record, Aaron Jones or Chuba Hubbard?
Jones without Dylan, Chuba with Dylan.
Sounds about right.
Okay. Jordan Love. No
How
thanks?
much will he do?
Yeah, it's the same story every week with Carolina. But to be fair, they're not just good against quarterbacks. They give up the fewest points to quarterbacks, not just because of they give up rushing work. 7th best in passing yards per attempt allowed, too. So I think they have a legitimately good pass defense. And you got the wide receiver injuries, too. Would you start Flacco and Mullins over?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Would you start
And Bryce Young?
No, liar. Minshew or Jordan Love?
As of now, Love, but that might change.
Dave, give me the scenarios in which you would start a Packers receiver.
If Jaden Reed or Christian Watson were to practice on Friday and get the green light, I'd feel okay starting them as number 3 options. That's about it. If they're both out, then Dontavian Wicks is the one that is the number 3 option.
If if Luke Musgrave doesn't play, would you start Tucker Kraft or Dallas Goedert?
I think I have Kraft over Goddard, assuming that Devontae Smith plays.
Okay. And sit Bryce Young. He has scored single-digit fantasy points as a quarterback in 6 straight games. Chuba Hubbard.
It's going to go down as one of the worst draft picks ever.
Yeah.
I feel.
I hope you're wrong.
Wait, can't you give him a chance for next year though? Just to
Oh,
see.
sure, but you have to factor in what they traded to get him, and so he's got to outperform all those picks to justify the move.
Oh, I don't think anybody liked the trade for Carolina when it happened, except for Panthers fans, and now they don't like it for obvious reasons.
The Bears loved it.
Yeah, well, they should have. It was a fantastic trade. Finally, they made a good trade after the Claypool trade and 100 other trades that they've made. But I want to give Bryce the benefit of the doubt in year 2. Different coaching staff, hopefully a better offensive line, schemed up better. He has to be schemed up. That's just how it is. But I'm not ready to write him off as a total dud.
His guys don't really get open either, so definitely needs a wide receiver. Chuba Hubbard is about 21st in the rankings. Adam Thielen. Adam,
I kind of I'm glad you brought him up.
Yeah,
I kind of like him.
Really?
Just because of how bad this Packers defense is. Kind of like him. I think he's a number 3 receiver this week in PPR.
He's a number 3 receiver every week in PPR.
And I kind of like him. Yeah. Well, I'm not going to rank him as a top 24 guy. Let's not go crazy, but
unfortunately, he's been kind of like a number 4. These are his PPR fantasy points in his last 8 or 9 games. 1.2, 5.5, 12.4, 8.3, 10, 12.9, 4.2, 7.2. I mean, that is terrible.
I think he can get 13 PPR points against Green Bay.
That would be his most since I don't even. Oh, no, wait. You know what? I screwed up. I read
He had one good game in there.
I read some of Jonathan Mingo's stats in there.
Okay.
All right. So in his last 8 games, 15
game 8 for DJ Chark, game 9 for Jonathan Mingo, game 10 for Terrence Marshall. Oh, there's that.
My bad. No, he has been really bad though. I mean, it's 12.4 or fewer in 6 of his last 8 games. In 3 of his last 4 games, it's 8.3 or fewer PPR fantasy points. And one of the big differences is he's barely out targeting Jonathan Mingo. So Mingo has not done anything, but he's taken targets from Thielen. And
you know what though? It's funny because like we hate that clearly because Thielen's been a decent fantasy option. That's smart on the Panthers. Like,
yeah,
get their young guys going.
Yeah. Okay. Sit the Carolina tight ends and would you start the Packers DST over the Ravens and Niners?
Yes.
Not over the Niners, but over the Ravens.
I'm just going to read this question because it's funny because it's 2 commercials. KRAFT or the touch, the feel of Otten.
Oh, look, I get a chance to sing.
Yeah, totally.
I think Adam singing makes the Otten one better. But it has to be Adam singing it.
Is it KRAFT? Is that how it goes?
That's it. But no one remembers that one. Most people remember the Otten one.
Yeah. All right. Later, everybody.
That's the question. We get 100 chat questions every show, and that's the one you answer.
It's too bad the Falcons didn't draft Kraft because then we could have Heineken to Kraft.
Beer cheese. Instead, they drafted Pitts, and that offense is the Pitts.
Someone says, remember Oil of Olave? Of course I remember Oil of Olave. It's still the best team name I've ever had.
Speaking of that, I can't wait to talk to Dan today.
Yeah. What are we going to make fun of him for today?
Oh, he'll just do something on his own.
I told him to watch Just Friends, and he refused. He's like, I don't have time for Just Friends. It's like, come on, man.
He refused?
He said he was too busy.
Are you confusing him with me? Because I told you I wasn't going to watch it either.
I'm telling everybody to watch Just Friends. It's that funny.
Such a good movie.
Yeah.
Hey, Adam.
What?
Who does your son think is going to win between the Eagles and the Giants?
Oh, yeah. Jamie, my son he's obsessed with football right now. Gets home from school yesterday, washes his hands, goes to the table to have a snack. He goes, Adam, unprompted, he goes, the Eagles are going to crush the Giants.
Nice.
Okay, thanks, buddy. Appreciate that. All right.
Listen, don't force your son into your misgivings.
No, he only likes teams based on how cool their mascot or their logo is. He likes.
Don't force him to be a Hurricanes fan. Don't force him to be a Giants fan.
He's a
I don't know
Jaguars
if to be a
fan.
Yankees fan at this point. Knicks,
He's
forget
Jaguars. Happy holidays, everybody. We'll talk to you later on the mailbag.